Laurent considered the question. Was he angry to learn that what he had thought was a spontaneous response to his mistake had actually been part of a planned strategy? No, he said finally. How could I be? Look at what came from it. Look at Antoine, at the thousands of children who've been through our programs. Look at how the industry has changed. Michael nodded, relieved. That's why I chose to tell you now. The truth doesn't diminish what we built together. It just adds another layer to the story. As they finished their coffee, Laurent looked at Michael with new understanding. So, the real story isn't about my mistake or your response. It's about a plan to create change that needed a moment to bring it to life. Michael smiled. The real story is about all of it. Your mistake, my response, the plan behind it, and most importantly, what we all built afterward. Sometimes change needs a catalyst, a moment that captures attention. What matters is what grows from that moment. The next day, as Laurent stood on stage at the Grand Palace's 10th anniversary celebration, he looked out at the gathered crowd. Hotel executives from around the world, community leaders, and most importantly, the children, now adults, whose lives had been touched by the initiative. He didn't share Michael's revelation. That would remain between them. Instead, he told the story as he always had, about a mistake, a generous response, and the remarkable changes that had grown from that moment. Because in the end, that was the story that mattered. Not the planning behind it, but the transformation it had created in an industry, in countless lives, and in Laurent himself. The true legacy wasn't in how it all began, but in how it continued to grow and change lives long after that first night at the Grand Palace Hotel. That was the end of our story about Michael Jordan and how he turned a moment of disrespect into something amazing that helped many people. Where are you listening from today? I'd love to know which part of the world you're enjoying this story from. If you like this story about kindness and seeing beyond appearances, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. We share many more interesting stories just like this one. Don't forget to share this video with your friends and family too. Spreading stories of kindness and understanding helps make our world a better place for everyone. When we share these important messages, we remind each other that how we treat people matters, no matter what they're wearing or where they come from. Thank you for listening, and we'll be back soon with another inspiring story. When a tired Michael Jordan walked into the Grand Palace Hotel in Paris, wearing simple clothes and a baseball cap, no one recognized the famous basketball star. The hotel manager, Pierre Laurent, looked at Michael's casual appearance and said the presidential suite might be too expensive for him. Instead of getting angry, Michael stayed calm and made a phone call. The young hotel workers, Sophie and Theo, immediately knew who he was and were shocked by their manager's mistake. Within 24 hours, Michael would turn this moment of disrespect into something that would change not just the hotel, but countless lives. His response would prove that actions speak louder than words, and his actions were about to speak volumes. Michael Jordan looked out the airplane window as the lights of Paris came into view. The year was 1997, and the Chicago Bulls were on a special tour across Europe to help more people fall in love with basketball. Michael was tired. The flight from London had been short, but this was their third country in just 5 days. 10 minutes to landing, Mr. Jordan, the flight attendant said with a smile. Michael nodded and straightened his seat. Even after all these years of fame, he still dressed simply when he traveled. Today he wore plain blue jeans, a gray t-shirt, and a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. He didn't want crowds following him everywhere. Sometimes it was nice to just be normal. The plane touched down at Charles de Gaulle Airport, and Michael was the first one off. The rest of the team would arrive tomorrow, but he had come early to set up some special events. AE driver waited for him at the exit. "Grand Palace Hotel, please," Michael told him, sliding into the back seat of the black car. The driver's eyes went wide in the rearview mirror. "You are Michael Jordan, the basketball player?" Michael smiled. "That's me." "It is an honor, sir. My son has your poster on his wall." As they drove through Paris, Michael watched the city lights reflect on the Seine River. The Eiffel Tower stood tall against the night sky. Even though he had visited many amazing places around the world, Paris always felt special. 30 minutes later, the car pulled up to the Grand Palace Hotel. It was one of the fanciest hotels in all of Paris, a building from the 1800s with gold details and perfect gardens. Movie stars, presidents, and royalty stayed here when they visited France. A young man rushed to open Michael's door. "Welcome to the Grand Palace, sir." Michael stepped out, stretching his long legs after the drive. He only had a small bag with him. His assistant would bring the rest of his luggage tomorrow. He walked through the giant glass doors into the lobby. The Grand Palace Hotel lobby looked like something from a fairy tale. Crystal chandeliers hung from high ceilings. The floors were shiny marble, and fancy furniture sat on thick, soft carpets. Beautiful paintings covered the walls, and fresh flowers filled the air with a sweet smell. Michael walked up to the front desk, where a thin man in a perfect black suit stood typing on a computer. The man's name tag read, "Pierre Laurent, manager." "Good evening," Michael said. "I have a reservation." Laurent looked up quickly, then went back to his computer screen. "Your name, sir?" he asked, without really looking at Michael. "Jordan. Michael Jordan." Laurent typed the name, but didn't show any sign that he recognized it. He probably wasn't. A basketball fan, Michael thought. That happened sometimes, especially in Europe, where soccer was more popular. "Ah, yes. We have your reservation. You requested our presidential suite?" Laurent finally looked up, his eyes moving from Michael's baseball cap to his simple clothes and small bag. His eyebrows raised slightly. "That's right," Michael said. Laurent cleared his throat. "Sir, perhaps there has been some misunderstanding. The presidential suite is our finest accommodation. It might be too expensive for you." The words hung in the air. Michael blinked, not sure he had heard correctly. Too expensive? For him? Two young hotel workers standing nearby gasped. The young woman whispered something to the young man, and they both stared at Michael with wide eyes. They clearly knew who he was. Michael didn't get angry, though he felt a flash of hurt. He had faced judgment based on his appearance before. Instead of making a scene, he simply reached for his phone. "I understand," he said calmly. "Let me make a quick call." Laurent nodded, looking relieved that this awkward moment might be over soon. He probably thought Michael was calling someone to help him find a cheaper hotel. As Michael dialed his agent's number, he noticed more people in the lobby were looking his way. A small crowd had formed near the entrance, and people were pointing through the glass doors. Word was spreading that Michael Jordan had arrived in Paris. The young woman from behind the counter approached Laurent and whispered urgently in his ear. Laurent's face suddenly changed. The color drained from his cheeks, and his eyes grew large with shock. Sir, Laurent said, his voice now shaking slightly. Are you the Michael Jordan? The basketball player? Michael ended his call and put his phone away. Yes, that's me. Laurent's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. The two young hotel workers looked like they might faint from excitement. Outside, the crowd was growing larger by the minute. I must apologize for the misunderstanding, Laurent stammered. Of course, the presidential suite is ready for you. It would be our honor to have you stay with us. Michael could have walked out. He could have made a scene. He could have embarrassed Laurent in front of everyone. Instead, he simply smiled. In his mind, he was already forming a plan that would turn this awkward moment into something much more meaningful. Thank you, Michael said, taking the room key that Laurent now held out with a trembling hand. I think I'll stay for one night and see how it goes. As Michael walked toward the elevator, he made another quick call. The conversation was brief, but by the time he hung up, he was smiling. What happened next would surprise everyone at the Grand Palace Hotel, especially Pierre Laurent. Sometimes, Michael thought as he rode the elevator up to his suite, actions speak louder than words, and by tomorrow, his actions would speak volumes. The presidential suite of the Grand Palace Hotel was as fancy as Michael expected. 2 huge rooms with golden trim on the walls, soft carpet that felt like walking on clouds, windows that showed all of Paris lit up at night. But Michael wasn't thinking about the fancy room. He was thinking about what had just happened downstairs. He wasn't angry. Michael had learned long ago that getting mad rarely fixed anything. Instead, he felt a strange mix of disappointment and determination. As he unpacked his small bag, there was a knock at the door. "Room service, Mr. Jordan," called a voice. Michael hadn't ordered anything, but he opened the door anyway. There stood the 2 young hotel workers he had seen at the front desk, the ones who had recognized him right away. "We didn't really bring food," the young woman said nervously. She had short dark hair and a name tag that read Sophie. "We just wanted to apologize for what happened downstairs." The young man next to her nodded quickly. His name tag said Theo. "Mr. Laurent doesn't watch basketball. He didn't know who you were." Michael smiled. "That's okay. Not everyone has to recognize me." "But the way he spoke to you was wrong," Sophie said, her eyes serious. "People should be treated with respect, no matter who they are." Michael nodded, surprised by her wisdom. "I agree completely." "Everyone in Paris is talking about you being here," Theo said, his eyes bright with excitement. "There are at least 50 fans outside now, and reporters too." "We just wanted to say we're big fans," Sophie added. "My brother has all your shoes, and we watch Bulls games whenever we can." "Thank you," Michael said. "That means a lot to me." After they left, Michael made some more phone calls. One to his agent, David Falk, one to his friend and teammate, Scottie Pippen, and one very special call to someone he hadn't spoken to in years. By the time he finished, it was past midnight, but Michael didn't feel tired anymore. His plan was coming together. Meanwhile, downstairs in the hotel lobby, Pierre Laurent was having the worst night of his career. After Michael had gone up to his room, Laurent had asked the other staff who exactly Michael Jordan was. What he learned made his stomach drop. "He's only the greatest basketball player in the world," Sophie had told him. "He makes more money than movie stars. Nike makes billions from his shoes. People everywhere know his name." Laurent had looked up Michael Jordan on the hotel computer and felt sick. The man he had just suggested couldn't afford the presidential suite was worth hundreds of millions of dollars. He was more famous than most of the celebrities who had stayed at the Grand Palace. Now, Laurent sat in his office with his head in his hands. The phone kept ringing with reporters, asking if Michael Jordan was really staying at the hotel. Outside, fans waited, hoping to catch a glimpse of the basketball star. Laurent had already received 2 angry calls from his boss. "How could I have been so stupid?" he muttered to himself, pacing back and forth. "How do I fix this?" There was a knock at his office door. It was Sophie and Theo again. "What is it now?" Laurent asked, not meaning to sound so harsh. "We just came from Mr. Jordan's room," Sophie said. Laurent's eyes widened. "You bothered him? After what happened? You could lose your jobs." "He was very nice," Theo said. "Not angry at all." "That almost makes it worse," Laurent groaned. "We think you should apologize," Sophie suggested carefully. "Mr. Jordan doesn't seem like the type to hold a grudge." Laurent nodded slowly. "Yes, you're right. I'll speak to him first thing in the morning." But morning would bring surprises that none of them could imagine. At 7 a.m., Laurent was all ready. At work, rehearsing what he would say to Michael Jordan. He had prepared a special breakfast, arranged for fresh flowers, and even found a basketball magazine for the star to sign for Laurent's nephew. At 7:30, the hotel doors opened and 5 large men in Chicago Bulls warm-up suits walked in. Laurent recognized Scottie Pippen, Dennis Rodman with his colorful hair, and Coach Phil Jackson from the pictures he had looked up last night. "Welcome to the Grand Palace Hotel," Laurent said, trying to sound confident. "Mr. Jordan is expecting you." "Is it true what happened?" "Last night?" asked Pippen, his voice cold. Laurent swallowed hard. "There was an unfortunate misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" Rodman laughed without smiling. "You told the best player on the planet he couldn't afford a room." "I didn't recognize," Coach Jackson cut him off. "That's the problem. You judged him by how he looked, not who he was." Laurent felt his face turning red. "I made a terrible mistake. I plan to apologize to Mr. Jordan immediately." "Good luck with that," Pippen said. "Michael's not one to make a scene, but he doesn't forget either." The Bulls players walked toward the elevator, leaving Laurent feeling even worse than before. How could he fix this disaster? An hour later, when Laurent was helping check in some new guests, he saw Michael Jordan walk through the lobby. Laurent excused himself and hurried over. "Mr. Jordan," he called, "could I speak with you for a moment?" Michael stopped and turned. Unlike yesterday, today he wore a perfectly fitted suit that probably cost more than Laurent earned in a month. People in the lobby stared and pointed. "Of course," Michael said, his face calm. "I want to apologize for last night," Laurent said, his voice shaking slightly. "I made a terrible mistake. I judged you unfairly based on your appearance, and that was wrong." Michael studied Laurent's face for a moment. "Apology accepted," he said simply. Laurent blinked, surprised it was that easy. "Really?" "Everyone makes mistakes," Michael said. "It's what happens next that matters." "Is there anything I can do to make it up to you?" Laurent asked. Michael smiled, the same smile that appeared on billboards and TV commercials around the world. "Actually, there is. I'd like to invite you to my room this evening. There's something I want to discuss with you." Before Laurent could respond, Michael was walking away, leaving the hotel manager wondering what the basketball star had planned. Something told Laurent that this story was far from over. While Laurent worried about his meeting with Michael Jordan, the basketball star sat in a cafe across from the hotel. He stirred his coffee slowly, his mind drifting back to where it all began. Wilmington, North Carolina. Michael hadn't always been famous. Born on February 17, 1963, he grew up in a simple house. With his parents, James and Dolores Jordan, and his 4 siblings. His father worked hard at a General Electric plant, and his mother was a bank teller. They weren't poor, but they weren't rich either. Michael learned early that respect wasn't about money or fame. It was about how you treated others. Never judge someone until you've walked in their shoes, his father used to say. It was advice Michael had carried with him all his life. The cafe window offered a view of the Eiffel Tower in the distance, as Michael watched tourists. Taking pictures, he remembered another time when someone had judged him too quickly. It was 1978, and Michael was 15 years old. He had tried out for the varsity basketball team at Laney High School, but didn't make the cut. Coach Clifton "Pop" Herring had chosen a taller player instead. "You're just not ready, Michael," Coach Herring had told him. Those words had hurt, but they didn't break him. Instead, Michael had played for the junior varsity team and practiced harder than anyone else. He grew taller that summer, 4 inches in just a few months, and came back stronger and better. By his senior year, Michael was the star of the team. He received a scholarship to play at the University of North Carolina, where he hit the game-winning shot in the 1982 NCAA championship game against Georgetown. The Portland Trail Blazers passed him over in the 1984 NBA draft, taking Sam Bowie instead. The Chicago Bulls picked Michael 3rd overall, and he quickly proved everyone wrong again, becoming Rookie of the Year. Now, 13 years later, Michael had 5 NBA championships, 5 MVP awards, and was known worldwide as the greatest basketball player ever. His face appeared on billboards from New York to Tokyo. His Nike Air Jordan shoes were the most popular sneakers in history. But sitting in that Paris cafe, Michael wasn't thinking about all his success. He was thinking about the lessons he had learned along the way. There was the time in 1990 when he walked into a fancy restaurant in Chicago wearing jeans and a t-shirt. The host had asked him to leave because he didn't meet the dress code. Michael didn't argue or name drop. He simply left, changed clothes, and returned later. The restaurant staff was embarrassed when they realized who they had turned away. Or the time in Barcelona during the 1992 Olympics, when a shop owner didn't want to serve him because he thought Michael was just another American tourist. When fans recognized Michael outside the shop and swarmed for autographs, the owner changed his tune quickly. Michael sipped his coffee. What bothered him about last night wasn't that Laurent hadn't recognized him. Fame wasn't important to Michael. Respect was. What bothered him was how quickly Laurent had judged him based on his casual clothes and small bag. Michael thought about all the young fans who looked up to him. Kids like Sophie's brother with the poster on his wall. Many of those kids came from neighborhoods where people were often judged by how they looked or how much money they had. Michael wanted to show them that your worth wasn't about your wallet or your fame. His phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was David Falk, his agent. "It's all set up, Michael," David said. "I spoke with the hotel owner this morning. He's horrified by what happened and fully supports your idea." "Great," Michael said. "And the other part?" "Your old friend Marcus is on board too. His foundation will handle all the details." Michael smiled. Marcus Williams had grown up on the same street as Michael in Wilmington. Now he ran a foundation that helped kids around the world. Perfect, Michael said. Let's make sure the kids are from all different neighborhoods in Paris, not just the fancy ones. After hanging up, Michael paid for his coffee and walked back to the hotel. He had one more call to make before his meeting with Laurent. Back in his suite, Michael called his mother in North Carolina. Even with all his success, he still called her several times a week. "How's Paris, baby?" Dolores Jordan asked when she picked up. "Beautiful as always, Mom," Michael said. "Something happened at the hotel that reminded me of what Dad used to say about walking in someone else's shoes." Michael told her about Laurent not recognizing him and suggesting the suite was too expensive. "And what did you do?" she asked. "I didn't get mad," Michael said. "I'm going to turn it into something good." "That's my boy," Dolores said proudly. "Your father would be so proud." James Jordan had been murdered in 1993, a random act of violence that had shattered Michael's world. Not having his father there to see his success was Michael's deepest pain. "I know, Mom," Michael said quietly. "I'm trying to live how he taught me." After saying goodbye to his mother, Michael looked out at the Paris skyline. His fame and fortune hadn't changed who he was inside. He still remembered what it felt like to be the skinny kid who wasn't tall enough for the varsity team. He remembered the sting of being judged too. Quickly, being told he wasn't good enough. That was why tonight's meeting with Laurent was so important. Not because Michael wanted an apology, he already had that, but because he wanted to create something meaningful from this moment. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," Michael called. It was Laurent, right on time. The hotel manager looked nervous, his hands fidgeting with his tie. "Thank you for meeting with me, Mr. Jordan," Laurent said, stepping into the room. "Please, call me Michael," he replied, gesturing to a chair. Laurent sat down, his back straight and tense. His eyes darted around the room, noticing that Michael had barely unpacked. "Are you planning to check out?" Laurent asked, worry clear in his voice. Michael leaned forward. "That depends on our conversation." "I am truly sorry about—" Michael held up his hand. "I already accepted your apology, Pierre. That's not why I asked you here." Laurent looked confused. "Then why?" "I want to tell you a story," Michael said, "about a boy from North Carolina who was once told he wasn't good enough." As the sunset painted the Paris sky in shades of orange and pink, Michael began to share his journey. Not the one the world knew from highlight reels and commercials, but the real story of challenges, judgment, and perseverance that had shaped him. By the time he finished, Laurent would understand that this moment wasn't just about a hotel room. It was about something much bigger than both of them. Laurent sat quietly as Michael finished talking about his life. The hotel manager's face showed surprise, then understanding, and finally respect. The room had grown dark, with only a small lamp lighting their faces. "I had no idea," Laurent said finally, "about being cut from your high school team, about your father." He paused. "Thank you for sharing your story with me." Michael nodded. "Most people only see the championships and the commercials. They don't see the hard parts." "If I may ask," Laurent said carefully, "why are you telling me all this? You could have just checked out and gone to another hotel. You could have complained to my boss or the media." Michael stood up and walked to the window. The lights of Paris shimmered below. "I had 3 choices when you said the room might be too expensive for me," Michael explained. "I could get angry and make a scene. I could leave and find another hotel. Or I could stay and turn this into something positive. He turned back to face Laurent. I chose the third option. But why? Laurent asked. Because getting angry doesn't fix anything, Michael said. And leaving would mean missing an opportunity. Opportunity? Laurent repeated, confused. Michael smiled. To change things. Not just for me, but for others too. Michael sat back down and leaned forward. Here's what I'm thinking. The Bulls are in Paris to promote basketball, right? But we're only reaching people who can afford tickets to big arenas or who already love the game. Laurent nodded, still not understanding where this was going. What if we did something different? Michael continued. Something that brings the game to kids who might never get the chance to play in a place like this hotel. You want to play basketball here? Laurent asked, his eyes wide. Not just play, Michael said. I want to host a free basketball camp for kids from all over Paris, especially from neighborhoods where they might feel they don't belong in fancy places like the Grand Palace. Laurent's mouth opened, but no words came out. We could use your grand ballroom, Michael went on, his eyes bright with excitement. Turn it into a basketball court for one day. Bring in kids from all backgrounds. Show them that places like this should be open to everyone, not just people who look rich or famous. Laurent finally found his voice. But the ballroom? It has marble floors and crystal chandeliers. The owner would never. I already talked to the owner, Michael interrupted. Actually, I've known him for years. Jacques Dupont and I met during the 1992 Olympics. Laurent stared in disbelief. You know Mr. Dupont? Personally? Michael nodded. We stayed in touch. When I called him this morning to tell him what happened, he thought my idea was perfect. Laurent sank back in his chair, trying to process everything. So, you want to bring how many children? About 50, Michael said, from all different parts of Paris. Rich neighborhoods, poor neighborhoods, everywhere. Kids who love basketball, but might never get to meet an NBA player or step foot in a hotel like this. And you want to do this? When? Tomorrow, Michael said simply. Tomorrow, Laurent nearly shouted. But that's impossible. We would need equipment, security, staff. It's all being arranged, Michael assured him. My friend Marcus Williams runs a foundation that does events like this all the time. His team is flying in tonight. The Bulls staff is helping too. All we need is your permission to use the space. Laurent took a deep breath. And if I say no? Michael shrugged. Then I'll leave, find another hotel. But I think this could be something special. Something that changes how people see the Grand Palace Hotel. There was a long silence as Laurent thought about everything Michael had said. Finally, he looked up with new determination in his eyes. I think you're right, Mr. Jordan. Michael, this could be special. He stood and extended his hand. The Grand Palace Hotel would be honored to host your basketball camp. Michael smiled and shook Laurent's hand firmly. Great. And one more thing, I'd like Sophie and Theo to help organize it. The junior staff members? Laurent asked, surprised. They were the only ones who saw me for who I am, not what I was wearing, Michael explained. I think they understand what we're trying to do here. Laurent nodded slowly. I'm beginning to understand too. After Laurent left, Michael made another phone call, this time to Marcus Williams. It's a go, Michael said when Marcus answered. The hotel manager is on board. Perfect, Marcus replied. My team lands at midnight. We'll bring everything we need. What about the kids? Michael asked. We've contacted community centers in 5 different parts of Paris, Marcus said. They're thrilled. These kids are going to have the experience of a lifetime. And the other part? Michael asked more quietly. All set, Marcus confirmed. The papers were drawn up this afternoon. As soon as you sign them, it's official. Good, Michael said. No one knows about that part yet, right? Just you, me, and Mr. DuPont, Marcus assured him. Everyone will find out tomorrow. After hanging up, Michael looked out at the Paris night sky one more time. He thought about all the times in his life when people had judged him too quickly. Tomorrow, he would turn one of those moments into something that might change many lives. His father's words echoed in his mind. It's not what happens to you that matters, son. It's how you respond. Michael was about to respond in a way that would surprise everyone, especially Pierre Laurent. By morning, the Grand Palace Hotel was buzzing with activity. Word had spread among the staff that something big was happening, though few knew exactly what. Sophie and Theo had been called to a special meeting with Laurent at 6 a.m., and they hadn't stopped smiling since. Is it true? Asked a bellhop, stopping Sophie in the hallway. Michael Jordan is turning our ballroom into a basketball court? Sophie nodded excitedly. Mr. Laurent put us in charge of helping. Trucks are arriving with equipment in 1 hour. The news spread like wildfire. Hotel guests stopped staff members to ask questions. The front desk phone rang constantly with reporters wanting to confirm the rumors. Outside, the crowd of fans had grown larger, with people holding basketballs and Jordan jerseys, hoping for an autograph. Laurent had never seen the hotel so alive. Usually, the Grand Palace prided itself on being quiet and exclusive. Today, it felt like the center of Paris. Sophie, Theo, Laurent called, waving them over. He looked different today. His perfect suit, replaced by a more casual outfit, his usually slick hair slightly messy from running his hands through it. The first trucks are here. Can you direct them to the service entrance? As Sophie and Theo hurried off, Laurent's phone rang. It was his boss, the hotel's general manager. Pierre, what is going on? The general manager demanded. I'm getting calls from newspapers all over France. Mr. DuPont approved everything, Laurent assured him. Michael Jordan is hosting a basketball camp for children in our ballroom today. There was a pause on the other end of the line. That's actually brilliant publicity, the general manager finally said. But why wasn't I informed? It all happened very quickly, Laurent explained, after my mistake. Word of Laurent's comment to Michael had also spread among the staff. Some thought he should be fired. Others felt sorry for him. Everyone was watching to see how the famous basketball player would treat him today. At 9 p.m., the rest of the Chicago Bulls team arrived. Scottie Pippen, Dennis Rodman, and Tony Kukoc walked through the lobby, drawing gasps and stares. Coach Phil Jackson followed, talking quietly with team staff. Where's Michael? Pippen asked Laurent as the team gathered near the elevators. He left early this morning, Laurent replied nervously. Said he had some people to meet. Pippen exchanged looks with Rodman. That sounds like Michael. Always has a plan. By 10 a.m., the transformation of the grand ballroom was underway. The elegant furniture had been carefully moved and stored. Workers rolled out special flooring over the marble, creating a basketball court complete with lines and team logos. Portable basketball hoops were assembled at each end. This is amazing, Theo said, watching the ballroom change before his eyes. A woman with short gray hair approached them, clipboard in hand. "Are you Sophie and Theo? I'm Dr. Patricia Williams, Marcus's mother and the foundation director. Michael said you two would be helping us today." Sophie nodded enthusiastically. "We'll do whatever you need." "Perfect," Dr. Williams smiled. "The children will arrive at noon. I need you to help organize them into groups. Some speak only French, so we'll need translators." "We can do that," Theo assured her. By 11:30 a.m., news vans lined the street. Outside the hotel, a reporter from France's biggest sports channel set up for a live broadcast in the lobby. "We're here at the Grand Palace Hotel," the reporter said into her microphone, "where NBA superstar Michael Jordan is turning one of Paris's most exclusive hotels into a basketball camp for local children. What prompted this unusual event? Sources tell us it began with a misunderstanding at check-in." Laurent hurried past the cameras, too busy to worry about what they were saying about him. He had just received word that the buses with children were approaching. Meanwhile, in a small cafe 3 blocks away, Michael sat with Marcus Williams. They were finalizing details for the day ahead. "The papers are ready to sign," Marcus said, sliding a folder across the table. "Once you do, it's official." Michael looked through the documents carefully before signing his name. "This feels right," he said. "My father would approve." "The kids have no idea you'll be there," Marcus smiled. "They were just told they're going to a special basketball event. When they see you, they're going to go crazy." Michael laughed. "That's my favorite part, seeing their faces light up." Back at the hotel, the Bulls players were warming up in the transformed ballroom. Rodman practiced trick shots, while Pippen helped staff arrange chairs and water bottles. "Have you ever seen anything like this?" a hotel guest asked her husband as they peeked into the ballroom. "Never," he replied, snapping photos. "Wait until our friends back home hear about this." At precisely noon, 5 buses pulled up to the hotel's side entrance. Children ages 8 to 14 poured out, their eyes wide as they saw the fancy building. They came from all different parts of Paris, some from wealthy neighborhoods, others from areas where luxury hotels were only seen in movies. Sophie and Theo greeted them in French, handing out T-shirts with the Bulls logo and Michael's number, 23. The children whispered excitedly to each other, still not knowing exactly what was happening. Laurent watched from a distance, amazed at how different the hotel felt. Usually, children were rare guests at the Grand Palace, and when they did visit, they were expected to be quiet and well-behaved. Today, their excited voices filled the marble hallways, bringing new life to the old building. "Mr. Laurent?" called a familiar voice. Laurent turned to see Michael Jordan walking toward him, surrounded by a group of men and women in matching foundation T-shirts. The hotel manager straightened his shoulders, still not entirely comfortable. "Everything is ready," Laurent reported. "The children have arrived." Michael smiled. "Great. There's someone I want you to meet." He gestured to an older man beside him. "This is Jacques Dupont, the owner of this hotel." Laurent blinked in surprise. Mr. Dupont rarely visited the property, preferring to manage his many hotels from a distance. "Mr. Dupont," Laurent stammered, "I didn't know you were coming today." "Michael and I go way back," Dupont said with a smile. "I wouldn't miss this for anything." Before Laurent could respond, excited screams erupted from the ballroom. The children had just spotted the Bulls players. "Sounds like the party's starting," Michael said. "Shall we join them?" As they walked toward the noise, Michael put a hand on Laurent's shoulder. "After today, people won't remember that you didn't recognize me," he said quietly. "They'll remember what we created together instead." Laurent felt a lump in his throat. "Thank you," he managed to say. Michael just nodded, then stepped into the ballroom where 50 children waited, unaware that their lives were about to change. What none of them knew, not the children, not Laurent, not even the Bulls players, was that Michael had one more surprise planned. A surprise that would make this day about much more than basketball. When Michael Jordan walked into the ballroom, everything stopped. The children, who had been excitedly talking to Pippen and Rodman, suddenly fell silent. Their eyes grew wide as they recognized the most famous basketball player in the world. Then, the room erupted. Children shouted in French and English, jumping up and down, pointing, some even crying with excitement. Michael smiled and waved, walking to the center of the makeshift court. "Bonjour, everyone," Michael said into a microphone. A translator beside him repeated his words in French. "Welcome to the first-ever Grand Palace Hotel basketball camp." For the next 2 hours, the ballroom was filled with the sounds of bouncing basketballs, running feet, and children's laughter. Michael and the Bulls players taught basic skills, organized small games, and signed autographs. Hotel guests gathered at the doorways to watch, taking pictures and smiling at the unusual scene. Sophie and Theo moved among the children, translating instructions and helping those who were shy or unsure. Laurent watched from the side, still amazed that this was happening in his hotel. The manager, who had always been strict about rules and proper behavior, found himself smiling as children raced across his perfect ballroom. After lunch, while the children were taking a break, Michael approached Laurent. "Walk with me," Michael said, gesturing toward the lobby. Laurent followed, curious. They walked through the hotel's garden, away from the noise and excitement. "You're probably wondering why I did all this," Michael said when they were alone. Laurent nodded. "I've been asking myself that question all day. Most people would have just complained or left." Michael sat on a stone bench and motioned for Laurent to join him. "When you suggested I couldn't afford the presidential suite, what bothered me wasn't that you didn't recognize me." "No?" Laurent asked, surprised. "No," Michael shook his head. "What bothered me was thinking about all the people who get judged. That way, every day, people who aren't famous, who can't prove you wrong by showing you their face on a magazine cover." Laurent looked down at his hands. "I never thought about it that way." "Let me tell you a story," Michael said. "When I was 11 years old, my family took a trip to a beach in North Carolina. We stopped at a nice hotel to use the bathroom. The manager told us the bathrooms were for guests only." Laurent winced, beginning to understand. "My father didn't argue," Michael continued. "He just took us to a gas station down the road. Later, I asked him why he didn't tell the manager who he was. My dad was well respected in our community. He said, 'Michael, I shouldn't have to be somebody important to be treated with. Respect.'" Laurent was quiet for a long moment. "Your father was a wise man." "The wisest I've ever known," Michael agreed. "After he was killed, I promised myself I would live by his example." "Is that why you became involved with Mr. Williams's foundation?" Laurent asked. Michael nodded. "Marcus and I grew up together. When he started his foundation to help kids get access to spaces they're usually kept out of, museums, theaters, nice hotels, I knew I had to help. The children today, Laurent said slowly. They're not just here to meet you, are they? They're here to learn that they belong in places like this, Michael explained. That their dreams don't have to be limited by where they come from or what they look like. Laurent looked back at the hotel, seeing it through new eyes. I've worked here for 15 years, he said quietly. I can count on one hand the number of times we've had guests from certain neighborhoods in Paris. That's why we're here, Michael said. To change that, even if it's just for one day. Laurent turned to face Michael directly. I want to thank you, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Not for forgiving my mistake, but for turning it into something meaningful. That's what my father would have done, Michael replied simply. They sat in silence for a moment, listening to the distant sounds of children playing. There's something else I want to talk to you about, Michael said finally. Something I haven't told anyone yet. Laurent looked at him curiously. Last night, I made a business decision, Michael continued. I want you to be the first to know, because it involves you directly. Me? Laurent asked, confused. I've purchased a 25% ownership stake in the Grand Palace Hotel, Michael said. Laurent's mouth fell open in shock. You? What? Mr. Dupont and I have been talking about it for years, Michael explained. This just seemed like the right time to do it. So you're my boss now? Laurent asked, trying to process this news. Michael smiled. Partly. But that's not why I'm telling you this. Then why? Because I want to make what happened today a regular event, Michael said. Every year, I want the Grand Palace to host a camp for kids from all parts of Paris. And I want you to help run it. Laurent stared at him in disbelief. Me? But I'm the one who made a mistake and then helped fix it, Michael finished for him. That's the kind of person I want working with me. Before Laurent could respond, Sophie came running into the garden. Mr. Jordan, Mr. Laurent, she called. The children are asking for you. They want to show you what they've learned. Michael stood and put a hand on Laurent's shoulder. What do you say? Ready to be part of something bigger? Laurent took a deep breath and nodded. In just 24 hours, his whole view of his job, of his life, had changed. As they walked back toward the ballroom, Laurent felt lighter somehow. Michael's words echoed in his mind. Part of something bigger. For the first time in years, he wasn't just a hotel manager enforcing rules. He was helping create something meaningful. What he didn't know yet was how much bigger this would become. Not just for the hotel, but for all of Paris. Evening settled over Paris as the basketball camp came to an end. The children were gathered in the hotel's dining room for a special dinner, still buzzing with excitement from their day with Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls. Waiters in formal uniforms served meals that many of the kids had only seen in movies. This is the best day ever, a young boy told Sophie as she helped him cut his chicken. I never thought I would meet Michael Jordan or eat in a place like this. Sophie smiled. Maybe someday you'll stay here as a guest. The boy shook his head. People from my neighborhood don't stay in places like this. After today, Sophie said, I think that might change. In a private dining room nearby, Michael had gathered a small group for an important meeting. Laurent sat at the table alongside Mr. Dupont, Marcus Williams, and several business people from around Paris. A woman named Marie Beaumont, who ran Paris's largest community center network, was there too. Thank you all for coming on such short notice, Michael began. What started as a response to a small incident has grown into something much bigger. He explained his vision, using the Grand Palace Hotel to create opportunities for children from all parts of Paris, especially those who would normally never set foot in such a place. Today was just the beginning, Michael continued. With my new partnership in the hotel, I want to establish a permanent program that breaks down barriers. Marcus Williams opened his laptop and presented slides showing similar programs his foundation had established in Chicago, New York, and Barcelona. The Grand Palace basketball camp would happen every summer, Marcus explained. But we're thinking beyond sports. We're proposing quarterly events throughout the year. Art workshops, science programs, career days where kids can meet successful professionals. Laurent watched in amazement. Just 24 hours ago, he had been worried about losing his IB-Bade's job. Now he was sitting in a meeting that could change the direction of the entire hotel. This could transform how luxury spaces interact with communities, Marie Beaumont said. Most of the children here today have grown up believing places like this aren't for them. Exactly, Michael nodded. When I was growing up, there were invisible walls around certain neighborhoods, certain buildings. I want to break those down. Mr. Dupont, who had been quietly listening, finally spoke up. As you all know, I've agreed to sell Michael a 25% stake in the Grand Palace. What you may not know is why. Everyone turned to look at the hotel owner. When I was 10 years old, Dupont said, my family was poor. My father worked as a janitor at a hotel much like this one. One day, he took me to work with him. I was so excited to see inside a fancy hotel. But the manager saw me and told my father that children like me didn't belong there, that I would disturb the guests. The room was completely silent. My father never took me back, but I promised myself that someday I would own a hotel where everyone was welcome. Dupont smiled at Michael when Michael told me what happened yesterday and what he wanted to do about it. I knew it was time for the Grand Palace to become that hotel. Michael reached over and shook Dupont's hand. That's why this partnership makes sense. We share the same vision. Laurent felt a lump in his throat. He had worked for Mr. Dupont for 15 years and never knew this story. Where do I fit in? Laurent asked quietly. Michael turned to him. I want you to head the community outreach program. You understand both worlds, the standards of a luxury hotel, and, after today, the importance of making everyone feel welcome. Laurent was speechless. Instead of being punished for his mistake, he was being offered a chance to help fix the very problem he had been part of. We'll need to hire someone to help you, Michael continued. Someone who already understands what we're trying to do. Sophie and Theo, Laurent said immediately. They've been incredible today, and they understood from the beginning what I failed to see. Michael smiled. I was thinking the same thing. The meeting continued late into the night. They discussed budgets, schedules, and how to make the program sustainable. The local business leaders pledged support, offering internships, equipment, and funding. By the time they finished, it was nearly midnight. The children had gone home hours ago, their faces glowing with excitement as they boarded buses, clutching signed basketballs and Bulls caps. There's one more thing, Michael said as the meeting wrapped up. I'd like to announce our partnership and the new program at a press conference tomorrow. So soon? Laurent asked, surprised. The media is already reporting on today's event, Michael explained. We should build on that momentum. As the others gathered their things to leave, Michael asked Laurent to stay behind. "I want to be clear about something," Michael said when they were alone. "This isn't about making you feel bad about what happened. It's about creating something good from it." Laurent nodded. "I understand, and I'm grateful for the opportunity." "There's something else you should know," Michael added. "The reason I was dressed so casually yesterday wasn't an accident. I often travel that way to see how people treat me when they don't recognize me." Laurent looked surprised. "You were testing me?" "Not exactly," Michael said, "but I do learn a lot about people and places that way. Sometimes more than when they know who I am." Laurent thought about this. "So, if I had treated you with respect from the beginning, then we might never have created this program," Michael finished for him. "Sometimes, mistakes lead to the best opportunities." As Laurent walked to his office after the meeting, the hotel felt different. The grand lobby that had always made him proud now seemed empty without the children's laughter. The perfect marble floors that he had worried might get scuffed now seemed cold without the excitement of the basketball games. For the first time, Laurent saw the hotel not just as a luxury space to be protected, but as a place with the power to change lives. And tomorrow, the world would hear about their plan. What had started with a misunderstanding at the check-in desk was about to become something that could change not just the Grand Palace Hotel, but hotels around the world. And Laurent, who had made the mistake that started it all, would help lead the way. As he turned off the lights in his office, Laurent smiled to himself. Sometimes being wrong was the first step towards something right. The Grand Palace Hotel never slept, but it had never been as busy at midnight as it was now. The Grand Ballroom, which had hosted a basketball camp just hours earlier, was being transformed. Once again. This time, it would become the setting for a press conference that would announce Michael Jordan's partnership with the hotel and their new community program. Sophie and Theo had volunteered to stay late to help. They moved chairs into neat rows, set up a platform for speakers, and hung a banner that Marcus's team had quickly designed. It read, "Grand Palace Community Initiative. Breaking Down Walls." "Can you believe what's happening?" Theo asked Sophie as they arranged flowers on the stage. "Yesterday we were just junior staff. Now we're helping Michael Jordan change the hotel." Sophie smiled. "I think we're helping change more than just the hotel." Across the ballroom, Marcus Williams directed a team setting up lighting and sound equipment. His phone rang constantly with calls from community leaders who had heard about the day's events and wanted to be involved. The mayor's office called. Marcus told Michael when they met for a late-night coffee. "They want to support the program. They're sending someone to the press conference tomorrow." Michael nodded. "Good. The more people involved, the better chance this has of lasting." In the hotel kitchen, chefs worked through the night preparing for a breakfast that would follow. The press conference. Laurent had suggested inviting the children back, along with their families. "Let them hear the announcement firsthand," he had said. "Let them see that they're part of this story." Michael had loved the idea. Now the kitchen staff, who usually made delicate pastries for wealthy guests, were baking hundreds of muffins and preparing fruit platters for families from all over Paris. The hotel's marketing team, working in a conference room upstairs, was putting together presentations about the new program. No one complained about the late hour. There was an energy in the building that made everyone want to be part of what was happening. "I've worked here for 20 years, the head chef told Laurent as they passed in the hallway. "I've never seen the hotel feel so alive." Outside, news vans lined the street. Reporters had been camped there all day. ever since word had spread about the basketball camp. Most had left when the children did, but a few remained, hoping for an interview with Michael Jordan. What none of them knew yet was how big tomorrow's announcement would be. It wasn't just about a basketball player buying part of a fancy hotel. It was about changing who belonged in spaces like the Grand Palace. At 3:30 a.m., the hotel lobby was still buzzing with activity. Michael sat with Mr. DuPont, signing the final documents that made their partnership official. "When I built this hotel 20 years ago," DuPont said, watching Michael sign, "I wanted it to be the most exclusive place in Paris. Now I realize that was the wrong goal." Michael looked up. "What's the right goal?" "To be inclusive without losing what makes this place special," DuPont replied. "To welcome everyone while still providing the service people expect from the Grand Palace." Michael nodded. "That's exactly what we're going to do." As dawn approached, the transformation was complete. The ballroom, which had been a basketball court just hours before, was now set up for a press conference. The dining room was ready for hundreds of guests from all parts of Paris. The lobby had been decorated with photographs from the basketball camp, showing children from different neighborhoods playing together in one of Paris's most exclusive spaces. Laurent walked through the hotel one last time before going home to change. Every staff member was still working, caught up in the excitement of what was happening. The maids who usually worked quietly in the background were arranging special welcome gifts for the children and their families. The doormen were practicing how to greet guests who might never have been in a fancy hotel before. "Will you be ready for today?" Laurent asked Sophie and Theo, who were still arranging chairs, despite having worked for almost 24 hours straight. They nodded too, excited to feel tired. "We wouldn't miss it," Sophie said. Laurent smiled. "Michael was right about you two. You understood from the beginning what took me years to see." By 7 a.m., the first reporters began arriving. They were surprised to find the hotel transformed from the night before. Television crews set up cameras in the ballroom as journalists from around the world took their seats. At 8 a.m., the buses arrived, bringing back the children from yesterday's camp, this time with their families. Many of the parents looked nervous as they approached the grand entrance of the hotel, but the children ran ahead excitedly, eager to show their families where they had played basketball with Michael Jordan. Doormen in perfect uniforms opened, the doors wide, greeting each family with the same respect. They showed to the hotel's wealthiest guests. Laurent stood in the lobby, welcoming everyone personally. "My son hasn't stopped talking about yesterday," one mother told Laurent. "He said it was like a dream." "Today will be even better," Laurent promised. By 9 a.m., the ballroom was full. Children and their families sat in front rows. Behind them were reporters, hotel staff, and business leaders from across Paris. A representative from the mayor's office sat near the stage, reviewing notes for a speech. Michael Jordan arrived last, walking in with Marcus Williams and Mr. DuPont. The room fell, silent as they took their places on the stage. Laurent, Sophie, and Theo sat in chairs just behind them, still amazed to be part of this moment. As Michael stepped up to the microphone, a hush fell over the room. Cameras flashed. Children whispered excitedly to their parents. Reporters leaned forward, pens ready. What had started as a misunderstanding at the check-in desk was about to become official. The Grand Palace Hotel was stepping into a new chapter of its history. Michael smiled at the crowd, especially at the children in the front rows. "Good morning," he began. "Thank you all for being here. Yesterday, something special happened in this hotel." Today, we're going to make sure it keeps happening for years to come." As he spoke, Laurent looked around the room at the faces of the children, their parents, his staff, and the reporters. Everyone was listening intently, feeling part of something important. The walls that had separated them, walls of wealth, neighborhood, and background, seemed to be fading away. The transformation wasn't just about the hotel. It was about people's hearts and minds. It was about who belonged where, and it was just beginning. The morning sun streamed through the Grand Palace Hotel's tall windows as Michael Jordan stood at the microphone. Cameras flashed, and children whispered excitedly as he began to explain his vision. "Yesterday, a small misunderstanding led to something beautiful," Michael said. "Today, I'm proud to announce that I've purchased a 25% stake in the Grand Palace Hotel, with a special purpose in mind." Gasps filled the room. Reporters scribbled furiously in their notebooks. "Together with Mr. DuPont and the hotel staff, we're launching the Grand Palace Community Initiative," Michael continued. "This program will open the doors of this beautiful hotel to children from all neighborhoods in Paris, teaching them that no space is off-limits to their dreams." As Michael spoke, pictures from yesterday's basketball camp appeared on a screen behind him. Images of children playing basketball in the grand ballroom, eating in the fancy dining room, and getting basketball tips from Bulls players filled the screen. "This will be more than just a yearly basketball camp," Michael explained. "We'll host quarterly events here. Art classes, science programs, career days, all designed to show young people that they belong in spaces like this one." The mayor's representative stepped up next, pledging the city's support. Then Marcus Williams detailed how his foundation would help run the programs. Finally, Mr. DuPont spoke about his own childhood and how this initiative would honor his father's memory. Throughout the speeches, Laurent watched the faces in the audience. The children were excited, of course, but it was the parents' expressions that moved him most. Many had tears in their eyes as they realized what this meant for their children's futures. After the formal announcement, Michael invited everyone to join him for breakfast in the dining room. Hotel guests mingled with families from all parts of Paris. Children showed their parents where they had played basketball the day before. Reporters interviewed anyone who would talk to them. Sophie and Theo moved through the crowd, making sure everyone felt welcome. They had been officially named as program coordinators working under Laurent's direction. "How does it feel?" Michael asked Laurent as they stood watching the scene. "Remarkable," Laurent replied. "I've worked here for 15 years, and I've never seen the hotel like this." Michael nodded. "This is what these spaces should be, places where everyone feels welcome, not just those who can afford the rooms." Just then, a young boy approached them shyly. It was the same boy who had told Sophie he never thought people from his neighborhood stayed in places like the Grand Palace. "Mr. Jordan," the boy said in careful English, "thank you for yesterday. It was the best day of my life." Michael knelt down to the boy's level. "What's your name?" "Antoine," the boy replied. "Well, Antoine, this is just the beginning," Michael told him. "I want you to remember this feeling. The feeling that you belong here, because you do." Antoine nodded solemnly. "My teacher says you were cut from your team when you were young. Is that true?" "It is," Michael confirmed. "But I didn't give up." "I won't give up either," Antoine promised. As the boy ran back to his friends, a hotel guest approached Michael and Laurent. She was an older woman who had been staying at the Grand Palace for 30 years. I must admit, I was concerned when I heard children would be running through the hotel, she said. But seeing this, seeing their faces, it's wonderful. This old place needed some new life. Throughout the morning, more people arrived. Local business owners came to offer support. Teachers asked how their schools could participate. Even other luxury hotels sent representatives, curious about the program. The Bulls players organized more basketball games in the ballroom, this time including parents and hotel guests. Scottie Pippen taught a young girl how to dribble. Dennis Rodman, with his colorful hair, showed a group of boys how to rebound. By noon, the event had taken on a festival atmosphere. A local band had arrived to play music in the garden. Chefs from neighborhood restaurants came to share foods from different cultures, setting up alongside the hotel's fancy pastries. Michael took a moment to step back and watch it all unfold. This was bigger than he had imagined when he first thought of responding to Laurent's comment. It had grown into something that could change lives. A reporter approached him for an interview. "Mr. Jordan, you're famous for your competitive spirit. On the court," she said. "What made you respond this way to being told a hotel room was too expensive for you, rather than getting angry?" Michael thought for a moment. "My father taught me that how you respond to challenges defines who you are. Getting angry wouldn't have changed anything. This way, something good comes from it. And the program will continue even after you leave Paris?" "Absolutely," Michael confirmed. "This isn't just about one day or one event. We're changing how this hotel interacts with the community forever." As the afternoon went on, the event began to wind down. Families thanked Michael and the hotel staff before heading home. Reporters packed up their cameras. The Bulls players signed one last round of autographs. Laurent found himself standing next to Sophie and Theo as they watched. The last buses pull away. "What happens now?" Theo asked. "Now the real work begins," Laurent replied, making sure this wasn't just a one-time special event, but the start of something lasting. Sophie nodded. "I already have ideas for the next event. Maybe an art day? Many of these kids have never been to museums." "Perfect," Laurent said. "Write it up, and we'll present it to Michael and Mr. Dupont tomorrow." As the hotel slowly returned to normal, the staff began cleaning up. But there was a different feeling in the air. Doorman, who had once looked suspiciously at anyone who didn't seem wealthy enough to be a guest, now smiled at every person who entered. Housekeepers, who had worked invisibly in the background, now walked proudly through the lobby. That evening, Michael sat with Laurent, Sophie, and Theo in the hotel restaurant, discussing plans for the future. Today was just the first step, Michael told them. What matters is what happens next. Looking around at the hotel that had once made him feel unwelcome, Laurent realized how much had changed in just 2 days. What had begun as his mistake had transformed into an opportunity, not just for him or for the hotel, but for all of Paris. And it had started with one simple truth. Everyone deserves to be treated with respect, regardless of what they're wearing or where they come from. 6 months passed quickly. The fall leaves turned golden in the Paris parks. Then winter came, with gentle snow that dusted the Grand Palace Hotel's elegant roof. Through the changing seasons, something remarkable was happening inside the hotel's walls. The basketball camp that had started with a misunderstanding had become the talk of Paris. Newspapers and television stations had covered the story for weeks. NBA star transforms. Luxury hotel after being told it's too expensive, read one headline. Michael, Jordan's perfect response to hotel snub, read another. But headlines faded. What remained was the lasting change at the Grand Palace. Laurent sat at his new desk in what had once been a rarely used meeting room. Now, it was the headquarters of the Grand Palace Community Initiative. The walls were covered with photos. From Sifit, their events, the basketball camp that had started it all, an art day where children created paintings inspired by famous works from the Louvre, a science program where they built robots. In the ballroom, Sophie knocked on his open door. "The Career Day presenters are confirmed," she reported. "We have chefs, doctors, business owners, and even a pilot coming next week." "Perfect," Laurent nodded. "How many children signed up?" 120, Sophie smiled. "We had to create a waiting list." Laurent shook his head in amazement. When they had first announced the program, they had worried about finding enough children to participate. Now, families from all over Paris were eager to be included. Theo popped, his head in. "The hotel manager from the Ritz just called. They want to know more about our program. That's the 5th luxury hotel this month." The impact of what had started at the Grand Palace was spreading. Other hotels in Paris had noticed the positive publicity and community goodwill. More importantly, they had seen how opening their doors to diverse communities had benefited everyone: the children, the staff, and even the regular guests. Mr. Dupont had received calls from hotel owners around the world, curious about how they could create similar programs. Laurent had traveled to London and Madrid to speak at hotel conferences about their initiative. The Grand Palace itself had changed in ways no one expected. Bookings had increased by 30%. Guests specifically requested to stay there because they had read about the program and wanted to support it. Some even scheduled their visits to coincide with community events so they could volunteer. The hotel staff had changed too. Sophie and Theo had been promoted to full-time positions running the initiative. Laurent had shifted from managing just the hotel to overseeing both hotel operations and community programs. And every new employee hired now received special training on treating all visitors with equal respect, regardless of appearance. Most surprisingly, the hotel's atmosphere had transformed. What had once been a quiet, formal space was now filled with energy. Regular guests commented on how much more welcoming it felt. The staff smiled more. Even the doormen, once intimidating in their perfect uniforms, had softened, greeting everyone who approached with genuine warmth. "Laurent, do you have a minute?" It was Mr. Dupont at the door. "Of course," Laurent said, standing to greet the hotel owner. Dupont closed the door. "I just got off the phone with Michael Jordan. He's coming back to Paris next month." Laurent smiled. Although Michael had returned to the United States after that first basketball camp, he had stayed involved through video calls and regular updates. His foundation sent support, and the Bulls organization had continued to participate remotely. "That's wonderful news," Laurent said. "The children will be thrilled." "There's more," Dupont continued. "He wants to expand the program. He's been talking to hotel owners in Chicago, New York, and Barcelona. They want to create a network of hotels with similar initiatives." Laurent sat back down, taking in this news. So it wouldn't just be the Grand Palace anymore? It would be hotels around the world, Dupont confirmed, all committed to opening their spaces to children who might otherwise never set foot inside. The idea was breathtaking. What had started with one thoughtless comment could grow into an international movement. And he wants you to help coordinate it, DuPont added. Laurent froze. Me? But I'm the one who made a mistake and then helped fix it, DuPont finished. For him, echoing Michael's words from months ago. That experience makes you perfect for this role. Later that afternoon, Laurent walked through the hotel, seeing it with fresh eyes. In the lobby, a young girl was playing piano, part of a new program where children from local music schools performed on weekends. Hotel guests had gathered around to listen, applauding after each piece. In the dining room, a head chef was giving a cooking lesson to a group of teenagers from a neighborhood school. They were learning to make the same gourmet desserts served to hotel guests. Even the presidential suite, the one Laurent had once suggested might be too expensive for Michael Jordan, had been transformed. Once a month, it hosted a Future Leaders overnight stay, where outstanding students from local schools experienced what it was like to stay in a luxury hotel. Antoine, the boy who had said people from his neighborhood didn't stay in places, like the Grand Palace, had been one of those students last month. Laurent had personally given him the room key. As Laurent passed the front desk, he overheard a check-in conversation. "Is this your first time staying with us?" the receptionist asked a man in casual clothes who had just arrived. "Yes," the man replied, looking around appreciatively. "I read about your community program and wanted to support it." The receptionist smiled. "We're very proud of it. Would you like information about upcoming events during your stay?" Laurent smiled to himself. 6 months ago, that same receptionist might have evaluated the man's casual clothes and small bag, making assumptions about whether he belonged. Now, everyone was welcomed equally. That evening, as Laurent prepared to go home, he stopped by his old office, now occupied by his successor as hotel manager. "How does it feel?" his successor asked. "Knowing that what started here is about to spread around the world." Laurent thought about it. "Humbling," he finally said, "to think that my mistake led to all this." "Not your mistake," his successor corrected. "Michael Jordan's response to it. That's what made the difference." Laurent nodded. That was the real story here. Not that he had judged someone by their appearance, but that Michael had responded with grace and vision rather than anger. As Laurent walked out of the Grand Palace that night, he passed the spot where Michael had stood that first evening. He remembered the quiet dignity with which Michael had handled the situation, and he thought about all the lives that had been changed because one person had chosen to respond to disrespect with respect. The impact was still growing, like ripples in a pond, spreading outward in ways no one could have predicted. 6 months had passed since the first basketball camp at the Grand Palace Hotel. Now, another 6 months later, Michael Jordan was back in Paris for the one-year anniversary of the program that had started with a misunderstanding at the check-in desk. The presidential suite, once the center of controversy, was now Michael's permanent room whenever he visited Paris. This time, he had arrived without fanfare, dressed casually just as he had been that first night. But the reception could not have been more different. "Welcome back, Mr. Jordan," the front desk staff greeted him warmly, regardless of his casual clothes. "It's an honor to have you with us again." The next morning, Michael met with Laurent, Sophie, and Theo in the community program. Office. Maps covered the walls, showing cities around the world where the initiative had spread. Pins marked locations of hotels that had adopted similar programs. Chicago, New York, Barcelona, London, Tokyo. "I never imagined it would grow this big," Michael admitted, looking at the maps. All from one comment about a hotel room being too expensive. Laurent shook his head. It wasn't the comment that did it. It was how you responded to it. The Grand Palace Community Initiative had become a model for hotels worldwide. In the past year, over 50 luxury hotels had launched similar programs, opening their doors to children who would never otherwise experience such places. The training program you developed is being used everywhere, Michael told Laurent. Hotel staff, learning to treat everyone with respect, regardless of appearance or background. It's changing the whole industry. Laurent had spent the past 6 months traveling to hotels around the world, helping them create their own community programs. The manual he had written, Open Doors, Creating Inclusive Luxury Spaces, had become required reading for hotel management schools. Sophie and Theo had also grown in their roles. Sophie now directed all youth programs for the initiative, while Theo managed partnerships with schools and community organizations. They had hired a team of 10 people to help run the expanding programs. "We have something special to show you," Sophie said, leading Michael to a wall covered with letters and drawings. These were notes from children who had participated in the programs. Some thanked Michael for the basketball lessons. Others wrote about spending their first night in a luxury hotel through the Future Leaders program. Many mentioned how the experience had changed what they thought was possible for their futures. Antoine, the boy who had once said people from his neighborhood didn't stay in places like the Grand Palace, had written, "Now I know I belong anywhere I want to be." Michael read the notes quietly, clearly moved. "This is what it's all about," he said finally. "Not just giving kids a fun day, but changing how they see themselves and their possibilities." Later that afternoon, Michael and Laurent walked through the hotel, observing the changes of the past year. The Grand Palace still maintained its luxury and elegance, but there was a warmth that hadn't existed before. Staff members smiled genuinely at every guest. The atmosphere was welcoming rather than intimidating. "We haven't lowered our standards," Laurent explained. "We've just made sure those standards apply to how we treat every person who walks through our doors, not just to how clean the floors are or how fancy the food is." In the dining room, they passed a table where hotel guests were chatting with teenagers from a local school who were there for a career mentoring lunch. "That's new," Laurent pointed out. "We've started inviting our regular guests to participate in the programs. Many of them are business leaders, artists, scientists. They have so much to share with these kids." The guest engagement program had been surprisingly successful. Many regular visitors to the Grand Palace now scheduled their stays to coincide with community events so they could volunteer as mentors or teachers. "And here's the most interesting change," Laurent said as they entered the lobby. He pointed to a family checking in, parents and 2 children, clearly nervous but excited to be staying at the famous hotel. They were not wealthy, their clothes were simple, and they carried worn suitcases. "Regular families now save up to stay here for special occasions," Laurent explained. "Before, they would have felt unwelcome or intimidated. Now they know they'll be treated with respect." The hotel had created special family packages at more affordable rates for weekends and holidays. These weren't charity. The rooms still covered costs and made a profit, but they made the experience accessible to people who would never have considered staying before. "The surprising thing is, our luxury business has increased too," Laurent noted. "Wealthy guests like the more welcoming atmosphere, and many choose us specifically because of our community values." That evening, the Grand Palace hosted a gala celebrating the 1-year anniversary of the initiative. The guest list included hotel owners from around the world, community leaders, and families who had participated in the programs. Michael Jordan gave a short speech, thanking everyone who had helped make the program a success. But the highlight of the evening came when Laurent took the stage. "1 year ago, I made a mistake," Laurent began, his voice steady but emotional. "I judged someone based on appearance rather than character. It could have ended badly, with anger, resentment, or a ruined reputation for this hotel." The room was completely silent as he continued. Instead, Michael Jordan chose to respond with grace and vision. He saw an opportunity where I had created a problem. And from that moment, all of this grew. Laurent gestured to the room full of people whose lives had been touched by the program. "I've learned that the true measure of luxury isn't exclusivity. It's not about keeping people out. It's about creating spaces of beauty and excellence that lift everyone up, spaces where everyone is treated with dignity and respect." The applause was thunderous. People stood, many with tears in their eyes, recognizing the profound truth in Laurent's words. Later, as the celebration continued, Michael found a quiet moment with Laurent near the same front desk where everything had started. "You know," Michael said, "my father used to tell me that character isn't built in moments of comfort. It's built in moments of challenge, in how you respond when things get tough." Laurent nodded. "I think about that night often. How differently things could have gone if you had responded with anger. Or if you had responded with defensiveness," Michael added. "We both made choices that led us here." As they looked around, at the celebration, at Sophie and Theo greeting guests, at children from the programs playing in a corner of the lobby, at hotel owners discussing how to bring the initiative to new cities, they saw the living result of those choices. The Rive Grand Palace had changed, but, more importantly, the people connected to it had changed too. Another year passed. The Grand Palace Community Initiative celebrated its second anniversary without Michael Jordan present. He had been busy with basketball responsibilities and his growing business empire, but he kept in regular contact with Laurent, Sophie, and Theo. "Michael's coming back next month," Laurent announced one morning as the team gathered for their weekly meeting. "He says he has something special planned." The news spread quickly through the hotel. In the 2 years since the program began, the Grand Palace had become known worldwide for more than just luxury. It was famous for being the birthplace of a movement that had changed how luxury spaces interacted with their communities. The staff immediately began preparing for Michael's return. Though he always insisted he didn't want special treatment, they couldn't help but want everything to be perfect for the man who had transformed their hotel and their careers. Sophie, now the director of youth programs for the entire hotel chain, cleared her schedule for Michael's visit. Theo, who managed partnerships with over 50 schools and community organizations, did the same. When Michael's private plane landed in Paris 3 weeks later, Laurent was waiting on the tarmac. The two men greeted each other with a warm embrace, their initial uncomfortable. Meeting now a distant memory, transformed into friendship. "How are things at the hotel?" Michael asked as they drove through the Paris streets. "Better than ever," Laurent replied. "The initiative is operating in 15 countries now. Over 200 hotels have adopted our model." Michael nodded, pleased, but not surprised. "And Antoine? How is he doing?" Laurent smiled at the mention of the boy who had captured everyone's hearts 2 years ago. "He's starting high school next month, and he just received a scholarship from your foundation." "Perfect," Michael said. "I want to see him while I'm here." When they arrived at the Grand Palace, Michael insisted on entering through the main doors, rather than the private entrance usually reserved for VIPs. He wanted to experience the hotel as a regular guest would. The lobby was busy with a typical mix of visitors: wealthy tourists, business travelers, and a group of children on a tour as part of the community program. When Michael walked in, conversations stopped. Even after all this time, his presence commanded attention. The children recognized him instantly. They had learned about Michael Jordan and the origins of the program that was bringing them into the Grand Palace that day. They stared in amazement, whispering excitedly to each other. Michael walked directly to them, crouching down to their level. "Are you enjoying your visit?" he asked in simple English, which their teacher translated. The children nodded enthusiastically. One brave girl stepped forward and offered him a drawing she had made of a basketball player standing in front of the hotel. "Is this me?" Michael asked, studying the picture. The girl nodded. "It's beautiful." "Thank you," he told her, causing her to beam with pride. After checking in at the same front desk where Laurent had once suggested the presidential suite might be too expensive for him, Michael asked to see the community program spaces. What had once been unused meeting rooms and storage areas had been transformed into classrooms, art studios, and activity centers. Children from all over Paris came here after school, and on weekends for programs ranging from sports to science to arts. "This is amazing," Michael said as they toured the spaces. "It's grown so much since I was last here." Sophie joined them for the tour. "We added 5 new programs this year," she explained, "and we're training staff from hotels in Singapore and Dubai next month." They passed a room where teenagers were learning about hotel management, part of a career development program that had already placed several graduates in jobs at luxury hotels around the world. "Some of the kids from our first basketball camp are in that program now," Theo pointed out when he met them in the hallway. "They're on track to become the next generation of hotel managers." That evening, Michael was given a special surprise. The hotel had arranged for many of the children from the original basketball camp to return for a reunion dinner. Now, teenagers, they entered the dining room shyly, amazed to see Michael Jordan waiting for them. Antoine, now taller and more confident, led the group. "Mr. Jordan," he said, extending his hand, "thank you for coming back to see us." Michael shook his hand firmly. "I've heard great things about you, Antoine. Laurent tells me you're heading to high school with a scholarship." Antoine nodded proudly. "I want to study business, maybe hotel management." "Like Mr. Laurent?" Michael asked with a smile. "Yes," Antoine replied. "He's been my mentor since that first day." The dinner was filled with stories and laughter as the teenagers shared how their lives had changed since that first basketball camp. Many spoke of new confidence, of setting higher goals for themselves, of no longer feeling that certain spaces or opportunities were off-limits to them. After dinner, Michael asked Laurent to show him the presidential suite, the room that had started it all. "It looks the same," Michael observed as they entered the luxurious space. "But everything around it has changed," Laurent replied. They stood by the window, looking out at the Paris skyline lit up against the night sky. "I have something to show you," Michael said, taking an envelope from his pocket. He handed it to Laurent. Inside was a photograph, faded and worn around the edges. It showed a young boy standing outside a hotel, looking up at it with wonder. "That's me," Michael explained. "Age 8, standing outside a hotel in Northie, Carolina that my father cleaned at night. He had taken me to see where he worked. Laurent studied the picture carefully. "I never told you the full story," Michael continued. "The reason I responded the way I did that night wasn't just because of my father's teachings. It was because I had been that child, looking at fancy places, and being told I didn't belong." He took the picture back, looking at it with a mixture of sadness and determination. "When you suggested the room might be too expensive for me, it wasn't about my pride or your mistake. It was about all the children who feel that way every day." Laurent nodded, understanding now on a deeper level. "That's why I came back," Michael said. "Not just to see how the program has grown, but to remind myself why we started it in the first place." Before Laurent could respond, Michael handed him another envelope. "And to give you this." Laurent opened it and gasped. Inside were tickets, enough for every child in their program. "What is this?" he asked, confused. "I bought out the Eiffel Tower for tomorrow evening," Michael explained. "Every child from our programs, plus their families, will have it all, to themselves, for 2 hours." Laurent was speechless. "Because they belong there too," Michael said simply. "Just like they belong here." 5 years had passed since that pivotal night when Laurent had suggested the presidential suite might be too expensive for Michael Jordan. What had begun as an uncomfortable moment had grown into a global movement that continued to expand and evolve in ways no one could have predicted. On a warm spring morning, Laurent stood in the lobby of the Grand Palace Hotel, watching as a tour group of business students from a local university listened attentively to their guide. "And this is where it all began," the guide was saying. "The spot where NBA legend Michael Jordan was told he couldn't afford to stay, and where he responded not with anger, but with vision." The Grand Palace had become something of a pilgrimage site for people interested in business ethics, community, engagement, and social change. The hotel had embraced this role, adding a small museum space that told the story of the community initiative's origins and growth. Laurent smiled to himself as he heard the guide continue the story he knew so well. He no longer felt shame when he heard it told. The story wasn't just about his mistake. It was about what had grown from it, about transformation and second chances. His phone buzzed with a message from Sophie. "They're ready for you in the conference room." Laurent made his way through the familiar corridors of the hotel. At 52, his hair had gray streaks now, and he carried himself with the confidence of someone whose life's work had found meaning beyond what he could have imagined. The conference room was filled with people from around the world: hotel executives, community leaders, foundation directors. They were gathered for the annual Global Inclusive Hospitality Summit, which the Grand Palace had hosted every year since the initiative began. As Laurent entered, the room quieted. These people knew his story. Many had heard him tell it. Taught to you previous summits. But today was special. Today they were celebrating 5 years of a movement that had transformed not just one hotel, but an entire industry. "Good morning," Laurent began. "5 years ago, I made a mistake that could have ended my career. Instead, thanks to Michael Jordan's response, it became the beginning of something extraordinary." On screens around the room, images appeared. Children playing basketball in the Grand Ballroom, art classes in luxury suites, career mentoring sessions in hotel restaurants. Then the images shifted to show similar scenes from hotels in New York, Tokyo, Sydney, Johannesburg, Rio de Janeiro, and dozens of other cities. Today, over 500 luxury hotels around the world have adopted our community initiative model, Laurent continued. More than 100,000 children have participated in programs that show them they belong in spaces previously considered off-limits to them. The numbers were impressive, but what moved Laurent most were the individual stories. Antoine, the boy from that first basketball camp, was now in his second year of college, studying hotel management with a full scholarship from Jordan's Foundation. He interned at the Grand Palace during his summer breaks. Sophie and Theo had taken the program's model to new heights. Sophie now directed global youth programs for the initiative, traveling the world to help hotels connect with their communities. Theo had developed a training curriculum used by hospitality schools to teach future hotel managers about inclusive luxury. "We've learned that true luxury isn't about exclusivity," Laurent told the audience. "It's about excellence and beauty that lifts everyone up, about creating spaces where everyone is treated with dignity." After his presentation, Laurent stepped into the hallway for a moment of quiet. A text message appeared on his phone. "Watching your live stream. Proud of you. MJ." Michael Jordan's ongoing support had been crucial to the program's success. Though his busy schedule meant he couldn't visit Paris often, he remained deeply involved, providing funding, connections, and vision for the initiative's growth. The relationship between Laurent and Michael had evolved into a genuine friendship. They spoke monthly, sharing updates about the program and their families. Laurent had even visited Michael's home in Chicago twice, meeting his children and seeing firsthand the private side of the basketball legend. "Mr. Laurent?" A voice interrupted his thoughts. Laurent turned to see a young woman in a hotel uniform. "Yes?" "There's someone here to see you," she said. "In the garden?" Curious, Laurent made his way to the hotel's garden courtyard. Sitting on a bench in the spring sunshine was an elderly man he didn't recognize. "Mr. Laurent," the man said, standing slowly, "I hope you don't mind the interruption." "Not at all," Laurent replied. "How can I help you?" "My name is Robert Williams," the man said. "I'm Marcus Williams's uncle. I was in Paris and wanted to meet you in person." Laurent shook his hand warmly. Marcus Williams's foundation had been instrumental in establishing the community initiative from the very beginning. "I have something I wanted to share with you," Robert continued, taking an old photograph from his pocket. "Something about Michael that few people know." The photograph showed two young boys, perhaps 8 or 9 years old, standing together outside a modest house. "That's Michael and Marcus as children," Robert explained. "They grew up on the same street in North Carolina." Laurent looked at the photo with interest. He knew Michael and Marcus had been childhood friends, but he'd never seen photos of them together as children. "What many people don't know," Robert continued, "is that Michael's father, James Jordan, and my brother, Marcus's father, worked together at the same hotel as janitors when the boys were young." Laurent's eyes widened in surprise. Both men experienced discrimination. "There," Robert explained. "They were talented, hard-working men who were never given opportunities to advance because of how they looked or where they came from." The pieces were beginning to fit together in Laurent's mind. "James and my brother made a pact," Robert continued. "They promised each other that if either of their sons ever became successful enough, they would buy a hotel and run it differently. A place where everyone would be treated with respect, regardless of appearance." Laurent sat down slowly, taking in this new information. "When my brother died, Marcus established his foundation to honor that dream. And when James Jordan was murdered, Michael carried that dream too, though he rarely spoke about it. So that night at the Grand Palace, Laurent began. "Wasn't just a coincidence," Robert finished. "Michael had been looking for the right opportunity, the right hotel, for years. When you suggested the room was too expensive for him, it wasn't." Just about that moment, it connected to a promise made decades earlier. Laurent was silent, processing how much deeper the story went than he had realized. "I thought you should know," Robert said gently. "What's happened here isn't just about one comment or one response. It's the fulfillment of a vision that began with two janitors who dreamed of a world where their sons would be judged by their character, not their appearance." After Robert left, Laurent remained in the garden, thinking about how differently he understood the story now. What he had seen as Michael's generous response to a thoughtless comment had actually been part of a much longer journey, a promise kept, a father's dream fulfilled. That afternoon, when Laurent rejoined the summit, he brought this deeper understanding with him. The initiative wasn't just about opening luxury spaces to underprivileged children. It was about fundamentally changing how those spaces operated, about transforming an industry built on exclusivity into one that balanced excellence with inclusion. The day ended with a special event in the ballroom, a basketball game between children from the program and hotel executives from around the world. Laughter filled the elegant space as children taught hotel CEOs how to dribble and shoot. Laurent stood at the back of the room watching. Sophie joined him, now a confident leader who had presented her own session at the summit earlier that day. "Hard to believe it all started with a misunderstanding at the front desk," she remarked. "It started long before that," Laurent replied, sharing what he had learned from Robert Williams. "We're part of a story that began decades ago with two fathers who wanted a better world for their sons." As they watched the game, Laurent noticed a new hotel employee hesitantly approach a group of children who had just arrived. The employee looked uncertain, perhaps worried about noise or disruption in the elegant space. "Watch," Sophie whispered. To Laurent's surprise, Antoine, home from college for the weekend and helping with the program, stepped forward to welcome the children and introduce them to the employee. "These kids are VIPs today," Antoine explained with a warm smile. "We want them to feel at home, here." The employee's hesitation vanished. He began helping the children find seats, making them feel welcome. Laurent smiled, watching the moment unfold. This was the true legacy of what had begun 5 years ago. Not just programs or initiatives, but a fundamental shift in how people thought about who belonged in spaces like the Grand Palace. The legacy lived in Antoine, once a shy boy who believed people from his neighborhood didn't belong in luxury hotels, now confidently welcoming other children into that very space. It lived in hotel employees around the world who had learned to see beyond appearances, to treat every guest with respect, regardless of what they wore or where they came from. And it lived in thousands of children who had walked through the doors of luxury hotels, not as the outsiders, but as honored guests, learning that no space was off-limits to their dreams. As Laurent watched the basketball game continue, he thought about how a single moment, painful though it had been, had connected him to a legacy much larger than himself, a legacy that would continue to grow long after he was gone. 10 years had passed since that fateful night at the Grand Palace Hotel. Laurent, now retired from daily operations but still involved with the Global Inclusive Hospitality Initiative, sat in a comfortable chair in his Paris apartment, surrounded by mementos from his remarkable career. On his coffee table lay a magazine featuring Michael Jordan on the cover. The article inside was titled "The Hotel Revolution," How Michael Jordan Transformed Luxury Hospitality. Laurent had been interviewed for the piece, sharing the story he had told countless times over the years. His doorbell rang. When he opened it, he found Antoine standing there, now a poised young man of 23, recently graduated from hotel management school. "Laurent," Antoine greeted him with a warm embrace. "Thank you for seeing me." "Always," Laurent replied. "How does it feel to be finished with school?" "Amazing," Antoine smiled, "and a little scary." They settled in Laurent's living room. Antoine had become like family over the years, a living embodiment of how the community initiative had changed lives. "I wanted to tell you something important," Antoine said. "I've been offered a management position at the Grand Palace." Laurent beamed. "That's wonderful news. From a child attending our first basketball camp to a manager at the same hotel. The circle is complete." Antoine nodded. "It's because of you and Mr. Jordan. You changed everything for me, for so many of us." Laurent waved away the praise. "We all played our parts. You did the hard work." "That's actually why I'm here," Antoine said, his expression growing more serious. "Michael Jordan is coming to Paris next week for the 10-year anniversary celebration, and he wants to meet with you privately before the event." Laurent raised an eyebrow. "Did he say why?" "Only that there's something important he wants to tell you," Antoine replied. "Something he's never shared before." The following week, Laurent met Michael at a small cafe near the Eiffel Tower, away from the crowds and cameras that still followed the basketball legend everywhere. Despite being in his 60s, Michael remained imposing, his presence drawing subtle glances from other patrons who pretended not to notice the superstar in their midst. "It's good to see you, my friend," Michael said, embracing Laurent. They ordered coffee and reminisced about the decade that had passed. The growth of the initiative, the lives changed, the industry transformed. The Grand Palace was now famous not for exclusivity, but for pioneering a new approach to luxury hospitality that balanced excellence with inclusion. "The 10th anniversary celebration tomorrow will be special," Laurent said. "Over 50 of the children from our original programs are coming back. Doctors, lawyers, business owners, and Antoine will be announced as the new assistant manager." Michael nodded, clearly pleased. Then his expression grew more thoughtful. "Laurent, there's something I've never told you about that first night," he said. "Something I think it's finally time you knew." Laurent leaned forward, curious. "You remember I arrived at the Grand Palace alone, before the rest of the team?" Michael began. Laurent nodded. "With just a small bag, wearing casual clothes." "What I never told you was that it wasn't a coincidence," Michael said. "None of it was." Laurent's brow furrowed in confusion. "I knew Jacques Dupont long before that night," Michael explained. "We'd met during the '92 Olympics, just as I told you. But what I didn't share was that we'd stayed in touch and had been discussing a partnership for years." Laurent's eyes widened as Michael continued. "We had been looking for the right opportunity to launch a community initiative together. Something that would open luxury spaces to people who felt excluded from them. But we needed the right moment, the right story to capture people's attention." "Are you saying," Laurent began, struggling to process what he was hearing. "I arrived at the Grand Palace dressed casually, with no entourage, intentionally," Michael confirmed. "Jacques and I had arranged it. We hoped someone might not recognize me, might make assumptions based on my appearance." Laurent sat back in his chair, stunned. "You were testing the hotel?" Testing me? Michael shook his head. Not testing. Creating. An opportunity. We didn't know what would happen exactly, or who might be working the front desk that night. But we knew something would happen that we could use to launch our initiative. So, when I suggested the presidential suite might be too expensive for you, Laurent said, slowly. It was exactly the moment we had been waiting for, Michael finished. Not because we wanted to embarrass you or the hotel, but because we needed a real example of the problem we were trying to solve. Laurent was silent for a long moment, processing this revelation. His mind raced back through the events of that night, seeing them in an entirely new light. "Why tell me now?" he finally asked. "After all these years?" Michael looked out the window at the Parisians strolling by. Because the initiative has succeeded beyond what Jacques and I ever imagined. Because it's become something real and lasting that has changed thousands of lives. And because you deserve to know the full truth of the story you've been telling for a decade. Laurent thought about all the presentations he'd given, all the interviews where he'd shared how his mistake had led to Michael's generous response. The story had become part of his identity, the hotel manager who learned a valuable lesson and helped change an industry. "Are you angry?" Michael asked, watching Laurent's face carefully.